Kingdom 2 Crowns features beautiful and intelligent 2.5D graphic design, which manages within 8 bits to create fully realized seasons. Forests exploding with life, birds flying from trees, mice scrambling, even a dog. Vivid day and night cycles, a layered strategy game. This art, all backed by music which ranges from atmospheric and engrossing to an element of the game itself. Kingdom 2 Crowns, K2C, is a triumph of game design and a victory for the art of minimalism in video games, from GUI to input. To shred UI elements any other strategy game demands and make it all control in a button press is akin to building a tiny home where everything has to have double or triple function, then be able to hide away to nothing. K2C does this by using every pixel, frame of animation, note of sound, and player control at its disposal. Through left and right movement only, a single action button, a player will go from vagrants around a dim campfire to a sprawling Iron Age castle conquering the evil greed on the frontiers. Raw Fury manages to accomplish this by treating everything else around the player as if it were the player's input. For example, a song comes on, medieval equivalent to lo-fi, go hunt. Eerie and brooding, get behind the walls. The movement of the player's pixel subjects, are they sprinting away? Danger. Are they calmly idling? Safety. Then the background, which like any good story asks those experiencing it to wonder what those statues are. Who built these? Where did the greed come from? And the time-telling sun and moon that arc across the fantastical skies. But then, there is the winter. Getting back to when the game lets you play it, in the style of an adventure game, the forest is used as a challenge to garner the player new tools, abilities, and power. Overgrowth represents the primary obstacle of the daytime, whereas the greed control the night. Forests are the fundamental hindrance and boon a budding sovereign faces early game, as they both obstruct the player's ability to expand and gain income. But their clearing comes at a cost, and the most difficult choices in the game tend to be where and what trees must be leveled. In a classic strategy game conundrum, it's not as simple as just clear the forest. Forests can only be cleared in order, tree by tree, I suppose in a simulation of density against the 2D design. Forests can't be cleared near portals, as workers won't get near them. Getting rid of trees near the merchant or village kills off these essential resources. Sometimes, most pressing, is when a player is asked to choose between a great base of operations for assault against the greed at the expense of a village and the people it offers, or taking out a village for the sake of a wider hunting field for archers. Procedural generation can sometimes spare the player these difficult choices, or make them happen so often that a run can be ruined. As K2C does have a sort of permadeath light system, the player will not lose all their progress, but will find themselves back at the start with no walls and a lot of vagrants. I've always found it easier to just start over personally. Forest also spawn deer, and in the winter the boar, so decisions carry consequences, and by the 4th and 5th island, it's never so simple as just build here, as one bad move can see your entire kingdom destroyed. Player needs to calculate where their expansion is best started, placed, and most importantly, deciding where they'll stop their boundaries and begin to settle down for the long haul. Here, the most excitement is often felt. Planning over the first few admittedly light evenings of greed, then starting out as soon as the dawn arrives to pay for infrastructure and hope a builder arrives in time to start and upgrade the project, along with archers in tow. K2C is advertised as microstrategy, yet contains the decision-making any strategy game challenges its player with. Time and resource management, committing to an option. Sure, on some level if one experiences the overtuned challenge islands, overtuned in the sense that they take a core mechanic from K2C like building the ship and make that the entire experience. A player can see that for K2C that means archers and income, but in the vanilla campaign that asks the player to manage all the different objectives, this is less obvious. A button to spend coins, coin on a vagrant to get a subject, coin on the bow stall to get an archer, coins into a gauge above a structure or dirt mound to build or upgrade, coins into a mine to go up in tech level, coin, A button press into a flag and begin the final assault. The idea of the game is immediately understandable. Collect coins, press A to spend them. Work during the day to build and prepare your kingdom, At night, greed come from portals seeking gold in the Sovereign's crown, an immediately rewarding hook as the player sees a tiny village come to life in the first 5 minutes, as if some glimpse into a digital version of the Indian in the cupboard.
Giant!
Me?
What's not so obvious is archers need fields to hunt to make you money, that trees being hacked down next to villages kills your ability to recruit, that the castle needs upgraded to the point where it can have a shield to recruit knights and the walls need upgraded to have a rally flag to make these knights attack, that those tiny little hermits in the forest each have a unique building assigned to a unique base asset, that the banker gives a slight interest rate of 1%, and the lighthouse offers a statistical reduction in crashed boats. Sure, the main challenges of K2C are build a kingdom to survive and provide transport, defeat the greed. And to do the latter, the player must do the former. These are the meat and potatoes of the game, and K2C, to both its credit and discredit, gives the player nothing in terms of understanding these things. For the first couple hours, the charm of the game's visuals, music, and delight in surviving greed waves carries the experience. As the total boredom of winter sets in, the player, at least I was, begins to ask what's the point and what's happening here. So it's off to forum boards and strategy guides. These have their place, but something as important and key to the game as killing greed portals shouldn't be left to getting frustrated enough to seek online guides, if Raw Fury wants the player to see and experience the thrill of closing greed portals and beating the game. The assaults are the final adrenaline rush the game offers once a player has established themselves with fortifications. A rush that isn't at all obvious that it exists at all, let alone it's how the player beats the game. Some audio-visual design like day, good, night, bad is self-evident. Build the crash boat because doesn't it look interesting? Going up in technology level has icons, but the result of going up in age so that the walls have flags and upgrading the castle so it can recruit knights which then need paid coins that represent their HP and their squad of archers that no longer make income, so you better have a surplus of archers making money in a field, and these knights can be upgraded to have claymores is not self-evident. As later patches have come in, the devs have put a priority on showing the player how hermits can be used to build unique and often essential buildings like bakeries and ballistas. But besides guides and rote memory, the player is still at a loss as to what certain hermits do, and frustratingly this tutorial activates every time and still doesn't indicate which hermit does what, nagging a player each time they grab the hermit for any reason. No, I need you to go away, tutorial. Whatever is causing you to spawn in all the time, this priority 1 fix, please.
By Azura, by Azura, by Azura! It's the grand champion! I can't believe it's you standing here next to me.
Still, it's better than at launch, when irreplaceable and sometimes run-dependent hermits like the Baker would meander outside the walls to be kidnapped by the greed. Because of K2C's deceptively complex nature, the biggest obstacle a player has to overcome isn't figuring out how to play, but what to do. And if reports are true and the human mind has gone from 15 seconds of attention span in 2000 to 12 in 2008, and finally just 8 seconds by 2015, now inferior to the attention span of the remarkably focused goldfish at 9 seconds, then it's entirely likely Kingdom sheds a great chunk of players just trying to figure out what's next. It took my first couple runs, for example, of building edge-to-edge walls, assuming it was the safest bet, and believing archers just appeared with coins to finally observe that they hunted rabbits and rabbits spawn in fields. As I say, simple to understand, build by day, survive by night, but what's not illustrated simply or at all is everything else. Tech trees, assaults, island hopping, hermits, and so on. In fact, only 1% of players have the achievement for beating K2C on Xbox, and 0.2% have the achievement for not having died while doing so. I mention this because if the Let's Play on this YouTube is any indicator, once a player does know how these things work, they are equally easy to understand, and the game can be beaten in a sitting if one can avoid winter. I understand there's a wanderlust for games that force a player to figure things out, along with some merit, but if the developers want players to see what they've created to the end, then some explanation goes a long way. For my part, I'd put icons on hermits or above their heads to indicate what they build. I'd show the player after hiring the first archer that they get money from fields. Of course, that only helps so much as our human mind, now inferior in attention to creatures that can be won by putting ping pong balls into bowls at carnivals, are seized by the cold of winter. When I was at Ohio University Scripps College of Communications, every day I went to the radio-television building for class, there was a poster at the door that greeted us. A teenager, right lip curled upwards, breathing from his mouth, clothes slung on and hanging loose, body slumped, barely holding himself upright, the remote only just gripped in his hand. It read, "Entertain me." This was our challenge against all statistics. They flipped the channel within 30 seconds. An audience is bored of a shot within 5. A teen's attention span was shortening each year, and so on. Now, a great impetus has been put on the solo experience. A need to restore complexity to games, big strategy and role-playing software. While every market indicator says that mobile games that can be learned in 2 seconds and offer 1,000 times the income and player base, we're at a point of survival for the soul of digital media. And no genre is more complicated, more cursed by a learning curve than strategy and simulation. Strategy games and simulation games are the equivalent to the polar bear for video games in 2020. Games like Surviving Mars or Stellaris can stop the players dead in their tracks just by the initial investment of time required to learn them. K2C, while not as intricate as those games, is asking players to make the same kinds of decisions at its core, just more simply. The challenge of modern game design is creating a game like Surviving Mars that offers the complexity that players claim to crave while making it immediately understandable and making things harder for a restoration or a return to big, complex solo games, is that players and developers are more often sticking with one title over the long haul. Players, when surveyed why they stick with one game for years, most often answer familiarity. According to Thinking Fast and Slow, we simply want and like to do things we believe we're competent at and good at. There's a direct correlation to feel-good hormones like dopamine in the brain when doing a familiar task, and a direct correlation to stress hormones like cortisol when we're asked to learn. Learning is challenging. Most players say they feel they work all day, have a busy life, and when they do game, they just want something to unwind with after a long day. Preferably something where they can just turn their brain off and relax. I know this is why I continually go back to games like Apex Legends. I don't have to think, it's just about shooting the mans. I find the same is often true, more embarrassingly, of Roblox. While 99% of Roblox is trash games that fit like a drug into the mind of 10-year-olds, there are some talented 14-year-olds out there making games that are stupidly effective in their simplicity and fun. I couldn't help but get hooked, but why? In a world of games like Civilization or Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2, why Roblox games that just barely manage to function most of the time? For the same reason we don't read War and Peace or Plato Republic all the time, but instead readers like myself inhale books like Girl with All the Gifts. It's fun. Fun
I like to have fun
cannot be underestimated, as it's of paramount importance when it comes to games. In A Theory of Fun, Ralph Koster defines fun as the act of mastering a problem mentally. So it's about generating curiosity then. In order, we might naturally create a learning environment, which to me is the act of probing questions and generating answers. What does this do and why? I wonder what will happen next. How do we create games that can be as rewarding to learn for their value and fun as Stellaris, but craft it in such a way the player isn't turned off by the knowledge they're learning? I think it lies in how these games are dressed. K2C, for its part, gets the first half right. It's deceptively simple, similar to Settlers of Catan. Easy to learn, difficult to master. I don't believe the sugar high of entertainment like Duck Dynasty, youth adult novels, films like Dumb and Dumber, or Not Another Clicker Game on Roblox are a shameful thing. In fact, their immediate effect of turning the brain to low gear is what I believe the genre has to recreate to make the learning curve approachable. There's a time and a place for War and Peace, or Red Dead Redemption 2, but sometimes you just need to shoot the mans, or get on the hamster wheel and turn off. Even Bill Gates washes the dishes. The question is how to convince someone it's worth their time to invest into War and Peace, or make it even seem possible. There's a necessary space in our lives for time killers. We are not designed like automatons for 24/7 productivity. The idea that something is productive as opposed to fun is a firewall to deeper games and entertainment. Great game design is camouflaging a positive use of time as a great way to unwind. We all know we're better off if we'd read for an hour and listen to classical music, but we still watch cable TV and eat Cheez-Its. If one takes the idea of productivity out of it, for example, you're stuck in a prison cell with absolutely nothing else to ingest but War and Peace, suddenly War and Peace is a great luxury. Ever been without electricity for a while? forgetting how much it's taken for granted, or not been able to have a favorite food for a time because you're sick. It's like that. Games that move the bar forward can beat the slush of mobile games if they can frame themselves better. Sure, like great books, there will always be an element of challenge that comes with the territory. Often the most rewarding video games are the ones that require something of us. The obstacle modern game designers face is how to create these experiences without losing a player in the first 5 minutes. The economics of the video game industry will demand this, as the industry will no longer fund games that they don't see an immediate profitability to. So how does the modern game designer who believes that games are art create an experience worthy of that definition that can still receive funding? I believe K2C offers a portrait into how strategy and simulation role-playing games survive into the future. Make things immediately playable and accessible, then add layers and weave new information as the player hungers for it to build a more complex game. K2C is an example of how to take an intricate genre like strategy and have the player building things and thinking within 30 seconds. Where it falls apart is guiding the player after the initial rush, leaving them without a sense of what's to come next. Kingdom 2 Crowns is the video game equivalent of a drunk. It begins so well, explodes with energy, and offers so much magic that it enchants immediately, but can lose a good deal of the magic as the night and time passes, and if the player doesn't use online resources, can end in a hangover rather quickly. The biggest flaw of Kingdom 2 Crowns is the winter, a winter that I played both pre and post update that allowed for boar hunting and berries. While these were welcome additions, they've never solved the problem of the winter being a total showstopper to the flow of the game. Yes, many players will critique that the banker exists to make the winter playable. I understand the sentiment, along with the game design decision behind it, but at 1% interest in moving as fast as possible to expand the kingdom and conquer days before the months grow and the challenge nigh insurmountable means the banker is often a low-tier investment against just rushing the game to avoid winter altogether. Players actively must work against winter, not just for the stopping of their tactical momentum, but because it is boring. Boredom is not something any game wants to be associated with, let alone a game that I see within its strengths a vision of the future for how these games survive modern time crunch and shorter attention spans. This is compounded by the game erring toward minimalism to a point where many players will fail to see the later islands and mechanics of the games as they are often opaque. With that being said, the initial spell-weaving aesthetic, immediate and intuitive hook of the gameplay loop, and managing to pack an entire strategy game into a button press makes K2C my game of the year for 2018, a 2 out of 3.